I'm just going to share before I get started that my good friend Kathy told me when she has to leave and get a haircut, so when she gets up to walk out, it's not because she doesn't like what I'm saying. So that's okay. That's okay. Okay, I believe should be about 3 now, and I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm so glad you all came to hear me. I wasn't sure how many folks would come, but I want to share about my life experiences in my career and who I am. I know you all feel you know me, but there's more to me than you know. No, as usual, I like to joke, so you all bear with me. But Joan and I have been here at Scotia since September 20th, 2020, correct? Yes, it'll be 4 years. Oh, he doesn't know. He doesn't keep up. In September, he doesn't know. But I just want to tell you a little bit what led to me choosing my career. My professional career was a clinical social worker. And I grew up in the rural area of Kentucky. The city was called Anchorage. And I'm going to be real because that's how life is. The white city was Anchorage, very rich, very prosperous. I grew up in outside of the black town called Berrytown, and Anchorage was surrounded by small black communities, but blacks did not live in Anchorage. So I was the youngest of 8 children, which I think is ironic. My mother and father were both one of 8 children. My mother attended college, and my father completed the 8th grade. So I just want to put in about my mother. She attended college in education, but she never taught in school because during segregation, if there were no openings in any of the black schools, then you didn't work. So she met my father, of course, and they got married, and she started having children, but she taught in places that she could. She taught in church, she taught in different community things, she taught us. So she was always a teacher at heart, but never in the classroom. Life was her classroom, basically. And my father worked for a lumber company, and he worked there many years. So what I learned from them, my mother was to respect everyone, and my father was to work hard, and when you work, always do a good job at what you do. So that's what was instilled in me as the youngest. I was very sheltered. So when I began school, I was very frightened, even though it was a 3-room black school, and went from the 1st through the 6th grade when I started. But as I grew and changed and got more in the community and out away from everything, it went well, but it was a time. What do I want to say? So I went to a 3-room school from the 1st through the 6th grade, and then desegregation came, and I was thrown into this humongous school from the 7th through the 12th grade, and it was challenging. That's what I'll say. It was very challenging. We say that segregation is gone, but it's not. Because what would happen when we went to school, the black kids would cling together because they were in the minority. But it was humongous, so it was an adjustment, but I went there through the 7th through the 12th grade. So after high school, I decided I was going to go someplace where I could see only black kids. So I went to a predominantly black, historically black university, actually the university my mother graduated from, and that's where I met my husband. My sophomore year, we had a biology class together, and he would pass me going to his seat in the classroom. He's looking like he doesn't remember that because he probably doesn't. His memory is just like, what? We did what? But we did. But that was Kentucky State College. Now it's Kentucky State University, and that's in the capital, Frankfort, Kentucky is where we went. When I Jerome, I know he spoke last month, but one of the things maybe he didn't share, and he's a modest guy, but my husband had 14 offers when he graduated from college. So for him to decide where we were going to go, because we got married the first semester of our senior year, he doesn't remember that either, and we got our little apartment, and we had our little three what was it? It was a nice little place upstairs. $75 a month was grand. It was great. He worked 3 jobs, I worked 2. But we survived and we graduated, and our parents were very happy. But our first move was to Fort Wayne, Indiana, and that's where I'm going to talk a little bit about my area of work. When I was in Fort Wayne, I worked at an agency that worked, how should I say it? It was with finances, or AFDC, they would call it now. So I would visit the families, determine if they qualified, that type of thing. We were there for a very short time because Jerome kept getting promotions, so then we moved he was then promoted, he went to Chicago, but we stayed in Indiana so I could just kind of transfer my work experience from one county office to another. And I worked in Miller, Indiana, is where we lived. And that was a good experience for me. That's right outside Gary, Indiana. So that kind of tells you where we were at that time. But Jerome would commute and take the train to Chicago every day. God bless him. And let me see where I am so I can focus, because you all know I can talk and I might get myself distracted. But when I was in college, I made the decision that I went to college because I made the decision I didn't want to enter the workforce after high school. I wasn't thinking about working. So that's why I went to college. And then when I was in college, I thought about how I grew up and the neighborhoods that surrounded me and the challenges that the people had. And I thought, where would I best serve? What kind of career could I have? And that's when I looked into social work. And so I got a sociology degree. They did not have a school of social work there. So I got a sociology degree, I think a minor in history, believe it or not. And when Jerome was promoted, when we moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I went to the University of Wisconsin, the Milwaukee campus, in the School of Social work. So I came out with my degree in social work. So my MSW has served me well throughout the years. It's a challenging field, but you have to have the right attitude when you go into that field. I've worked with some people who did not, but I've worked with many who have. In Fort Wayne, I said I did with finances, and I just want to give you all a summary, and then I want to talk to you about what I think we need to be doing at our age, at this time in our lives. I worked at a family service agency in Milwaukee, and that was a good agency because it was made up of therapy. We did therapy. And working with people, counseling is challenging. You have to have a right mindset because if you take your own thoughts into the sessions, that doesn't do you any good. You can't judge people when you're counseling. They're to do the work. You're to help guide them to get to help them solve whatever issues they're having. When I first started, I found that challenging because I often found myself biting my lip because I want to say, you idiot, or why can't you, or shouldn't you, because that's challenging when you're working with people, and you have to start where they are and then help them move forward. So that was always something for me. And then the other, when I was in Dayton, I also worked at a forensic psychology agency, and that's when we would assess those who have committed crimes. And I would be locked in a room with them, a small room, and do the interview with them, learning about their life history. What led you to this situation. Why are you in jail type thing? And the other part of my role was to talk with their families. That was more challenging than talking with the person who may have been incarcerated. And then I also spent time with those who had been recently released from incarceration. I just want to share one experience. One of the clients I worked with that freaked me out. Most of them didn't freak me out, but he would sit and lick his chihuahua whenever we met. I felt that was the strangest thing in the world, but we got through it. And he didn't get reincarcerated, but I found that odd because I guess that chihuahua gave him a lot of support. So he was showing it a lot of love. I never commented on it because you just don't do that. I said, if he wants to lick his chihuahua, he can lick his chihuahua. It's not, I'm not going to interfere with that. But what else did I, in Frankfurt, when Jerome got he decided to leave the business world, although now he's back into it, and go into higher education. So that's when I went with him. I always followed him wherever he went, to a university in Kentucky, Kentucky State, actually, where we went for undergrad. And he worked there for some years, and there I worked with the Upward Bound program. I know most of you all have heard of the Upward Bound program. So that's really is a good program. It was frustrating for me because, again, those was clients that I want to say, you idiot, what, sit down, what are you doing? You know, you got your future ahead of you. Why are you trying to mess it up? So it's such a good program. So I worked with that program. And let's see, where else? After we left Kentucky, because we're moving, my final work experience, Jerome came to Dayton, didn't we? No, we went to Fayetteville. Thank you. After we left there, we came to Fayetteville, where I worked for 7 years with Department of Social Services in protective services. And with that, I think when we look at what goes on around us, some of us don't want to know what's going on around us. But when you have young families who are trying to parent, who have no idea how to parent, and their way of parenting is to be neglectful or abusive to their kids because they don't know any other way. To this day, I don't believe people who abuse their children really want to do that. They think they're doing right, but they're not because they know no other way. Most of them were raised in an abusive environment, so they just perpetuate it on and on and on. And that's why the intervention is so important. Many of those children that we worked with try to be sure that they got intervention so that they wouldn't continue that type of behavior in their families when they had their families. That's the key. So, but my last 18 years, after I worked at the Developmental Evaluation Center here in Fayetteville, no, it was DSS, Developmental Evaluation Center is where I went, the CDSA. And that was very helpful because we worked with assessing children to determine if they needed services, whether they needed physical therapy or occupational therapy, speech therapy, whether they need counseling, whether the parents need to be referred for counseling. Those are things that were key in that job. And I think it was one of the best, I think it was most rewarding to me when I could see parents with, especially young children. We worked with neonatal parents. We worked with K-Fear, with the little early preemies who really need a lot of care. So that was a good experience. That was my last 18 years of work. And it was very rewarding. I was a supervisor, which I didn't particularly care for, but I did a good job, as my father would want me to do. That was my purpose, because when you're supervising others, you want to be sure, first of all, you're setting a good example, doing your own work in the correct way, and number two, instilling in them how, because most of them are young than I was, And actually, some of them had just really gotten out of college or graduate school, so, and never had worked. And you want them to have a good career in their profession. So whether I was supervising a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, or a speech therapist, since we did evaluations on children first, when I first went there, it was up to 18, then it dropped to 16, then it dropped to 8. And now they're only evaluating most kids from under 8 for delays and making recommendations for services for them. So that when I look at young parents and we as mature, I'm going to call us mature, when you see young parents and you say, why are they doing this? Or what, how can I help? That's what we should be saying. How can I help? Not, we know why they're doing it, because they don't know any better. That's the situation. They truly don't know any better. It's not that they don't love their children. I do believe some people should not have children because they don't, I don't know if I said should not have children. They don't appreciate their children. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. They don't appreciate who their children are and what their children could become if they instill in them the right things. But again, most of them didn't have a good background. They didn't have any guidance. They didn't have parents who would feed into them, pour into them, help them mature in the right, in a way that would be productive to society and to themselves first and then to society. But where was I? I want to share something with what one of my clients said to me one day. As I say, I grew up sheltered, and I want to flip back a little bit, and you all excuse me, if I'm rambling a little bit, but I want to go back to when I was in college and coming from a sheltered home, in my freshman dorm, and the first time I heard, not that I hadn't heard profanity before, but to hear such foul words coming out of females' mouths, I actually would jerk when I would hear those words. And then I would look and I thought, what in the world? Because some of them I'd never heard, even though I'd heard profanity before. But they were very unique in how they could use profanity. And I couldn't understand the purpose, but that was a huge shock for me when I was there. And so I recall when I was working with a client in, I want to say, Jerome moved me so many places, but I'm sure it was in Dayton, Ohio. And one of the things she said, we were like the third home visit, and she said to me, he don't mean me no good. And she was speaking of her husband, and I thought, yes, we finally made it, because he did not mean her any good, nor their children. If your husband is beating you up and beating your children, that's not me. Okay, beating you up and beating your children, then I was going to say, I'm going to stop now. Okay, beating you up and beating your children, no, he doesn't mean you any good. And we were able then to make progress and to get her out of that home situation, for her to make a life for herself and her children that was better than being beaten up once or twice a week. But she just thought that's the way it should be, until someone came and said, this is not how you should live. Another one was, let's see, I was going to say, a decision for change is one of the most difficult undertakings we can make in the life we create for ourselves. Sometimes it's not pretty. It can be ugly and indeed painful during the process. Who wants to give up a drug habit? Because I had a lot of drug abusers at different times that I worked with, that is destroying your life. But it makes me feel good, they were telling me. It makes me feel good. I can forget about all these ugly things that are happening around me. Just takes me out of it. Like the loss of their children to foster care, they wanted to forget about it. But you're not going to get them back, I would say, if you continue to abuse drugs. That's why they were removed. let's see, I've worked with many clients who would seek to change their lifestyles, but then would go back. And as a clinician, you can't give up because you don't want them to give up. You say, okay, this happened, but this is today. We're still going forward. We're not going to, you slid back here, you missed it, but you're going to pick it up and we're going to keep going. That was very important for them to have that support. I remember a young family. Now, this was a young family. He was probably early 20s, maybe as old as 26, 27 at the most. And they had a couple of young babies. And so I called him because it was on the brink of abuse. And he threatened me. He said, if you come out here, I will kill you. I said, okay, that means I got to come and see you because you're not going to kill me, but you may say you are, but you're not going to kill me. So, of course, I went for my visit, and he was out in his yard, raking his yard, just as calm as he wanted to be. We went in the house. We sat down with his wife. We made a plan, and they worked the plan. So I think frustration, as I say, not being raised right, people say things that they think they mean, but they really don't mean. I knew he wasn't going to kill me because some of my coworkers, oh no, you don't need to go out there. You need to call the police. He's threatening you. I said, this man is not going to kill me, okay? I was hoping he wasn't. But anyway, he didn't. When I got there and saw he was raking his yard, I knew he wasn't going to kill me. So, but that's some of the challenges. That's what I wanted to talk about, some of the challenges that we have in our lives. Let's see. One of the things when you're a human and a social worker especially is fulfilling the role of a clinical social worker must be done with an understanding of human nature. Emotional stressors. Those emotional stressors that will cause us to do some things that we ordinarily might not have done. Working since when we were in Fayetteville, as you all know now, Fort Liberty, I had a lot of military parents, male, female. And the challenge with military families is that when you're a soldier, you want your children to be soldiers. Well, they're not soldiers. They're little babies. They're little kids. They can't, what do y'all call it when you make your bed? That 4-point bed thing or whatever they do and all that stuff and all this stuff. It was the expectations were so high. And so working with them to help them understand, you're not at work right now. You're at home with your kids. You can't have these expectations. Maybe as they grow up. Now, I will say one of my brothers was career Army. His son, Glenn, when we went, you would think he was in the Army. Because I didn't work, I was the youngest. So he basically raised Glenn like he was in the Army. And nothing was out of place in his room. His bed was made like it was a military bed and all that good. I don't know if it's good stuff or what, but and so Glenn is a quiet young man, and I think that has something to do with it. He's not one who will reach out, and that comes from his upbringing. He was made to feel you got to stay within this parameter and don't branch out, and that's what he's doing with his life now. Let's see, neglectful, assisting a parent in learning why he or she is abusive, neglectful, smothering toward their child or children. That was the big thing with the military family. And as a social worker, I spent much time in court, representing clients, testifying, responding to juvenile prosecuting attorneys, the defense attorneys, law enforcement. It just goes on and on when you have to go to court or when you're working with attorneys or when you're working with the judges. And that was just a part of the role. Sometimes you would be in court all day and your case wouldn't even be called. but you were supposed to be called, but deciding on the process, it may not have gotten up. So you'd have to go back the next day. And then you're thinking about all the other things that are not being done. But that was the job. It was very important for me to keep in touch with, I've talked a little bit about it, but my prejudices, my biases, my emotions I was experiencing in every situation. Jerome would sometimes see me, and what would you tell me, baby? Just chill. Just let it go. It'll be all right, he'd tell me. Because I'd come home red up, and he'd tell me, calm down, it's going to be all right. And usually it would, but I had to be aware of where I was, and I couldn't let those impede me in working with the client. Working with them to establish solid relationships, because for them to trust me, it's very hard to trust someone when you've only encountered negative things in your life. And I had to establish that trusting relationship. And many times, like I said, I had to not say what I was thinking at the time, but when it was appropriate to say it and share it and work with them to make their lives a better place for themselves and their families. Let's see. Yes, you may. When did what come into my life? Children in my life? Let's see. We were still in Fayetteville, of course. So I got pregnant. Let's see. We were in Dayton, and Shayna was born in Columbus. So after I left Dayton from the Family Service Agency, I did not work in Columbus. So we were in Columbus about 3 years, maybe, about 3 years. So that was like the sabbatical. So when we moved to Kentucky, when I worked with Upward Bound, she was in kindergarten. She had finished her first semester of kindergarten, then she was in kindergarten in Kentucky. So that she wasn't little when I went back to work. I stayed home, and I thank God for it then, and I thank Him now that we were able to do that. Yeah, times where it got, maybe finances got a little tight, but we were able to do that. But otherwise, He blessed me that I could stay at home with her, and it worked out really well, because I would have been a wreck. It's hard for parents to work when they have little kids. I know that because I've worked with them, and I'm aware of that. But we were blessed to be able to have me at home till she got into kindergarten. And she really liked to come to our offices and, stuff like that. You know how kids like to do. They like to help you. I'd rather she didn't, but she did like to help. So one of my things, establishing that trusting relationship with clients who have experienced disappointments, had their lives negatively impacted, whether through their own actions or those of others, help them to work doing the work, which can be painful, as I said. Putting in place a therapeutic relationship with a mental health counselor was key with many clients, especially the children. Having a mindset to handle with care a parent who actually tossed her infant out the door to me, and she was up in her trailer door. I was down on the ground, and she said, well, here. And I thought, oh my gosh, good thing I was younger and could move faster than I can now, because I did move fast enough to catch that little baby. But that mindset, when I'm talking about, I'm having to work on my mindset, because I still had to work with that client. Yes, I took that baby into care, and that baby went to foster care, because you can't have a parent throwing the baby out the door. I don't care how angry you are, you just don't do that. So, and we developed a relationship, but it was hard for me to because I was very angry at that client, because I thought, what if I hadn't been fast enough to catch that baby? What if that baby had hit the ground and died, and you would be in jail for killing your own child. So I really had to work on myself some days, and because it was very hard for me to accept having grown up in a family where children were valued. I didn't. My mother and father both worked, but she only worked like 2.5 days a week. And when we were off, she was there. My father came home tired working at the lumber mill because that was a hard job. But he would, I can remember now sitting on his knee. That was very important to me. My father wasn't very talkative, but he would want us to sit on his knee and he would pat our back. And that was very, to me, very nurturing because he had to work a lot. But that was very nurturing when he would do that. So that's what I tried to, the things that I had in my life, even though we weren't, money isn't everything. That's what I would try to tell the clients, some of the clients who wanted to work all the time. And your kid, your kids need you. They need you at home. Well, I need to, we need, and we need this, but they already had everything they needed. But that was they felt money was the thing to have more than anything else. Yeah, but that one I'll never forget, that little baby come flying through the air. As mature adults, whenever we have the opportunity to positively assist families in need, whether monetarily or with your time, explore the ways you could bring it about. Be sure to research what you might do to be sure it's a legitimate, because we know there are a lot of things out there that are not for real. They're just there to, especially if it's a monetary thing that you want to do. Be sure it really is a credible organization, that your money is going to be going to a good place. And reparenting parents is a great need because of, like I said, households they may have been raised in with inexperienced parents themselves. If you have reached adulthood and have no idea how to raise a child when you are blessed with a child, whether you are aware of what parenting entails or not, you are more than overwhelmed with the stresses of parenthood. Parenthood, being a parent, as we all know, is challenging. And if you are a single parent, these stresses increase. And I worked with a lot of single parents. In fact, the lady who tossed her baby was a single parent. In many years of practice, I met young parents and older parents. No matter the age, they experience the same stressors, especially if the child was a preemie or born with a physical handicap or diagnosed with a disability as they start to grow and mature. So one of the things I think when you work with families, when you work with children, is putting your belief, not to put your beliefs aside, but not let your emotions take you down the wrong path with that person. You have to look at where they are, you want them to go, and how you're going to help them get there. Because they have to do the work. You can't do the work. And that was one of the hardest things, I think, in my career when I thought, oh, I could do that, and they would have this, and we could get this in place. But that wasn't the point. What would they have learned? They would have learned nothing. They still would not know how to take care of their parents, their children. And sometimes the grandparents were in the home as well, because we all often had extended families, households. So that's another issue. Or households where you knew something went on with that parent, and this was a single mother that I'm thinking of. She targeted only one of her 4 children. He was totally neglected. He would drink water from the faucet in the bathroom to be full because she didn't feed him. So we had to remove him from that family. And she was very upset about that because she couldn't process that she wasn't taking care of this little boy like she was the other 3 children. But she wasn't. The others were well taken care of, but whoever or whatever this little fella reminded her of, he was targeted. So I mean, you know how you see the little children in the films that they are malnourished, but they have the big belly, and that's how he was. And she didn't dress him. The other kids would be dressed, and he would just be around in his maybe some little underwear, and that would be it. And so he wasn't school age yet. So he went into foster care for a while. And I would like to give applause to anyone, if you're here, who has been a foster parent. Yes, there are some foster homes that are not the best, but there are foster parents who truly provide good care to the children that come in their home. And it's challenging because a lot of the kids I work with were some little bad actors because they didn't know any better. And that's what you did. You tore up, you screamed, you you fought, you didn't like rules, you didn't want to abide by the rules. She can't tell me what to do especially when I got with the teenagers. Oh my goodness, when I work with teens, oh, you all would have fun with that. They are something, and especially the little young men would always tell me, "Man, come on, Miss Scott, let me drive. I can drive. I said, not this car, you can't. Not this state car. County, mainly used was county car, but no, you can't drive this car. You just sit beside there and ride. But it's very hard, I think, when we don't realize what families go through who have challenges. So any questions? I don't want to, because I can go on and on about experiences and where I've worked. And as I say, when you become a licensed clinical social worker, you have to get your license renewed every 2 years, and that requires 40 hours of continuing education. So you're constantly taking courses, which is good because that keeps you on target and keeps you aware of what you need to be aware of. But any questions that you might have? Yes, Bob.
Your experiences change your parenting of your own children in any way?
That's a good question. I think being a social worker and being aware of what had gone on, as I said, Shayna was, oh, yes? I, yeah, right, there. I would say, I know what he's going to say. I'm sure he's going to say that she was spoiled, which she was, but she also had rules she had to follow, things she knew she had to do. And I'm very proud of her. She's a doctor of physical therapist at this time and has her own agency, she and her husband. Her husband's a doctor of occupational therapists, and they have an agency in Fayetteville. But I think what it had, Bob, for me, it was love. If you can let your child see, because to this day, Bob, she reminds me, the one spanking I gave her in her life, we had been over and over. She would go to bed, and I'd just be asleep, and I'd hear this voice say, "Mommy, Mommy." She would call me. I would get up, and I would go and say, "Shayna, what is it, darling? Mommy, could you pull my cover up?" Or, "Mommy, the light's shining in the window." Or, "Mommy, Mommy, Mommy, Mommy." So it went on for a month or two. So I told her one day when she was going to bed, "Shayna, if you call me tonight, Mommy will spank you." Well, you all know what happened. "Mommy, Mommy." So I said, "What is?" She said, "Oh, I got to use the bathroom." She had a reason that day. So I said, "The lights are on. You know you can go to the bathroom. You know Daddy's up. You could get up and go to the bathroom. You're fine." So we went to the bathroom, and I said, "What did Mommy tell you was going to happen?" The tears started coming. I gave her 3 licks. She never called me again. But to this day, she said she'd wake up frightened and afraid to call me because I've spanked her. The one spanking in her life. But that's how your kids do you. Probably true. She probably did wake up and was scared, but she didn't call me. I said, why don't you call your daddy? That's what I do. Call your daddy. Always mommy, mommy, mommy. But but any other questions or thoughts or comments? Yes. For I worked at Developmental Evaluation Center, and I worked with Cape Fear Valley would come and have I was an employee, they would come and work, we would work with their team to see premature babies at our agency. So I knew a lot of the medical providers at Cape Fear Valley. It could have been. I'm sure, Cape Fear is so big, but they would actually come to our agency, those who work with the preemies and things like that, that they would come in and the medical people would see them while we would do the evaluation on them. Oh, yeah, preemies are, yeah. Yeah, yeah. I think it's a miracle when you see a 21-weeker or a 22-weeker who is living and walking and developing. And that's why it's so important that they get the right intervention and at an early age. So that's some of the things we did, for sure. Anyone else? Yes. Well, depending on which agency, of course, when you worked at DSS, of course, they came from the communities or other agencies. But usually they all came from communities. Now, with the Developmental Evaluation Center, parents could refer themselves, they could bring their kids in, or the doctor may refer them. They just came from, all different places, that's for sure. I think that from the schools, the schools sometimes will refer a child, of course, to learn, although they had their own. Sometimes they felt they couldn't do as thorough a job as they might want to have done with that child to see what was going on with them. So it's community involvement is very important in children's lives. I think sometimes we forget that a child, they talk about a village, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it does. It really takes many hands to help a child grow and develop and be productive. And it's a focus. I've kind of gotten away from it. I'm trying to think now what I want to volunteer and do that will be helpful to the young people of this county, because it's a need. It truly is a need. The parents need it, the kids need it, the schools need it. It's just a need. And yes, Mr. Scott, I saw your hand. The nuts do what now? Yes, we do. Yes, Linda.
When you say training to deal with parents who were threatening you and
Yes, 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 yes. Yes, and that is very, very key. Now, when one of the things for the agency that I last worked for, when we went, and of course at the DEC, we also did home evaluations. We would go to the home if the parent couldn't get to the agency. And we served, initially when I started, we served like 10 counties, then it dropped to 6 counties. I think right now the CDSA still serves those 6 counties. So yes, we would go as a team when we went into the home. You didn't go into the home alone. You would go maybe 3 people, sometimes 2 people, sometimes 4, just depending on what would be needed. You do have to be wise and cautious. Like I said, the guy who said if he came to his house, going to shoot me, I had met with him before, and I knew he was a little wimp and he wasn't going to shoot me. And so I was comfortable in going and talking with him, meeting with his wife. But again, sometimes, like you're saying, your judgment can be off. And you have to then, when you're in the situation, look for those indicators, I'll call them, because I have left homes when the parent has become volatile, and that's not the time to stay. You just say, okay, I'll, I'm gone. I'm out of here. Yes.
The clarification, that wasn't a client that killed Karen, that was.
Social worker.
She was a social worker, and she was going, she stopped on the way back, and someone picked her up, started got following her, assaulted her, and killed her. It was not the client.
I didn't know that. We were always told it was a client, that's why they started sending two out.
Well, I think I'm right on that, but I could be, but hospice started going out with two or with a sheriff later on.
We were always told it was a client.
You might be right, but that's not, Jason grew up for his order, that wasn't where we were. But it wasn't, okay, I'm not.
It frightened me when you said you were going to sue the man in charge.
Okay. Yeah, well, I was a little bit at the time. I was younger, and I could conquer everything. But yeah, I think we did go with more than one worker, especially if the worker was new. They did not go by themselves because sometimes they didn't pick up on the cues of, we've done enough. We need to leave, and we can address this another time. And if you felt necessary, you'd make a referral to the police department for them to do an investigation. Because, again, as I said, we worked hand in hand with the attorneys and the judges and, law enforcement, because you have to protect the young people in your community and to protect the parents, because sometimes, I did investigations or did evaluations where the kids were abusing the parents. So you have to protect everyone in that family. And I had a question here, and then I'll go to the question back there.
What did you do with the brains? You say you were working with.
Yeah, one of the things that we would do, I would do, as a clinical social worker, do an assessment on the parents. And then the preemies would be, as I say, we would do that with Cape Fear, so the medical doctors were there. And we had nurses on our staff, but they would examine the child, see their progress, what they were doing at this time. And then I would talk to the parents, basically to identify any stressors they may be having. Because when you have a little premature baby coming home, even though maybe they're coming home from the hospital at 35 weeks, 38 weeks, maybe they were born at 20 weeks, because I've worked with babies who were born as early as 20 weeks and survived, to help them manage that. Because that's stressful, because they've been in the hospital seeing their babies hooked up to all kinds of medical equipment, seeing them grow up in those little, I call them the see-through windows, and seeing how they're growing and developing. So that was stressful for a lot of parents. So my role was really just to talk with them to see how they were mentally. The baby was going to, and was examined by the Cape Fear preemie doctors, pediatric doctors. Now, I thought I saw one more. I did not. Did I see another question? Well, if not, I just thank you all, because I think sometimes social workers get a bad rap, and I found some of the most dedicated people in that field who work with families, because it can be draining, can be very draining when you have a challenging family. I know when we work with medical people, they were drained because we were all dealing with the same family. And so you had to have patience, you had to walk in love and develop that trust. And if you could get that trust in place, those families would do the very best they were capable of doing, because you have to remember, some of these parents were limited cognitively, and not all, but some. And so if you were aware of that, you would get them into the right services to help them manage the needs of their kids and of their household. And that's what's important, because people say it lightly, you're looking at the next generation, but we want the kids and families of the future to be successful, because we have too much failure in this country. I'll just tell you that from working in the fields. Too many families that don't make it, that kids don't make it, kids that end up in jail, no matter what color, black, white, gray, green. They're in jail because of mistakes they made with not having been taught what they should do. And it's serious. Serious, serious. That's why when I worked at that forensic agency and met with those people were incarcerated and doing an evaluation, then meeting their families, and I thought, I see why. A lot of it was, just getting back at families or trying to escape from that environment, but it was the wrong way. Definitely the wrong way. Anything else? Any other comments? I do thank you all for your patience. I hope I didn't talk you to death, but thank you so much. My husband is working his mouth.
Light note, tell them about our first meal sometime that week, the Spanish steak.
What Spanish steak, honey?
Don't worry, if you don't recall, don't worry.
Did somebody bring us a Spanish steak? Oh, it was so good. Thank you all again.